this new tech innovation, like,
Right.
So that's my open-ended
I
contribution.
I agree with you.
All right, where are you
I'm with
today?
you.
Where are you at today, sir?
All right. Well, let me see here. We're live.
I
Here
can
we
tell.
go.
We're doing it.
And I'm recording as well. I think we should record it anyway, in either
Sure.
case, and then we can use it as podcasts.
Sure. Or we can chop it up with all these amazing AI tools that edit for you.
I think so. And I was thinking about that recently, where you're like, if I could just churn this into an AI thing, and then it could turn out like a 10-second video like you were talking about, or like
Good to
a
experiment.
1-minute clip or something like that. So yeah, I definitely think we should have a spirit of that. I also was thinking about sharing screen, which
Yeah.
just in case. There you go. So I'm also trying to figure out if we can share, because I think the way that it shows on screen is that we have this and we have us.
Yeah, we're much smaller. If anybody's came here to look at how handsome either of us are, we've taken that away from them.
It looks like the WCBH thing didn't work properly, so we're gonna have to fix that for next time. But I'm just one. And we have us. Oh, yeah, you know what?
We're much smaller. If anybody's came here.
Huh? Damn it. Oh, I'm looking at the YouTube video online right now, and it looks like I only see you when you speak, and I only see me when I speak. Unfortunately,
that might be a setting for Zoom.
Yeah. Well, we can
because it selects.
We can do this.
What does it look like now? What does it look like now?
When it's just the two of us, it shows the two of us.
Oh, okay, so it's
if the share screen messes up, so I'll have to fix that later. Anyway, cool, man. We have a bunch of topics that we want to talk about. But before, like, how are you doing? How's your week?
Well, I got a new hat. I'm pretty excited about.
What's the hat?
I sort of discovered in my last hat that a few friends of mine during pandemic noticed my new fashion trend.
Well, let's see it.
I would wear shirts and hats of where I've been, and they dubbed it experience wear, like that's my style of fashion. That I would wear like tourist shirts or like
I love that
weird NFT conference
shirts. Good motif.
Shit. But basically, I got this hat the last time I was backpacking. They probably see me wear it's like the Yosemite kind of like landscape, and I swear, like, I've never gotten more compliments from a broad range of people.
I remember that hat.
Like old people that love camping, young kids at NFT conferences that love the art, random people at In-N-Out. Like, I swear, nobody cares about anything that I wear ever, but that one hat, like, was the most exciting thing I've ever worn. And I sort of got to thinking, like, all right, well, maybe that's like a fashion.
That's the motif.
And so I started thinking, I do like Yosemite, but I love Sequoia. So I went on eBay and a few websites, and there is this awesome kind of like trucker hat, kind of vintage, kind of collectible space that I found myself into. So I found this, which is apparently some like really old hat.
Nice.
Sequoia National
Have you
Park.
Been to Sequoia?
That's my favorite place in California. I love it.
Really? You haven't been to Humboldt though?
Yeah, I've been to Humboldt, of course.
So you like Sequoia more than Humboldt?
Well, Sequoia is like the
big fat.
That's the forest of the Ents. If you really want to go.
It is. I went to Sequoia in 2020, early 2020. That was the last time I was there. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a happy place for me.
And the trees might be dying also, by the way.
Well, I saw that there was a controlled burn that they just did.
Oh, really?
It wasn't Sequoia, but it was some other state park. That's a Calavera State Park.
That they're trying to.
Well, they were trying to do a controlled burn, and it got out of control, and all the locals are super pissed because it got out of control. So,
well, all right. Well, nobody's online yet. This is great. We have no viewership. It's perfect. You gotta love it. Because we haven't really pumped it anyway, which is great. But we can at least have the feeling of being live.
Yeah, I'm less worried about who's listening today and more about how it goes.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you had some topics that you want to talk about. I'd love to talk about them. In addition to, I wouldn't mind even just starting with this article that would you want to start with that article?
Yeah, do you want to put the headline up in case anybody's
the headline? Well, Unfortunately, because we can't share screen. But you know what? I can type it to the chat. So I got YouTube chat on, so I can actually type it into the actual YouTube chat. Let's see here. But yeah, long story short, the article is Hollywood Strikes by
Mhm.
Stratechery. And to be fair to people who might not like this guy is probably my favorite writer in the tech space. He used to work at Apple University, and many other things. But he's been doing this for what feels like about a decade now, actually. And he's a single shop who basically writes and does a podcast. He used to have a podcast called Exponent. Anyway, obviously he commentates on the media and tech mainly. And he did a little commentary on the current strike, the Hollywood strike, which of course, the writers have been striking since May, right? And the actors just started striking. 160 plus thousand actors started striking on Wednesday, Thursday, right?
Mhm.
Which is the first time they've striked since 1960s. The writers struck in 2008, right? Which is around the time that you got
I
into
mean, they,
this
did they,
universe.
I remember right before COVID, there was maybe it was threatened and they eventually resolved it. But yeah, I mean, there's been stress points between the guilds and these studios and these streamers
Right.
For building recently. And I mean, I remember as I aged myself when I got out of college, and there was some big strikes in like early 2000, 2001 that sort of I think you maybe were smaller scale compared to these. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of the power of the labor movement, and sort of it's sort of asserting its will in these various milestones. I think what everybody's sort of observing now is this feels like more than just like the end of a contract. Like it feels like
Right.
there's some real grievances about how business has been conducted recently,
Right.
and how people feel left out of some, windfalls that have been great for some other folks. But also, and it seems like they're just compounding all their grievances, and maybe they do have some kind of leverage in this moment. I guess, like, I don't know enough about running labor unions, but I would have assumed the best time to strike would have been 3 years ago, like when
Oh, why?
profits were because it would have been at the moment when the most money was being
Mm,
made. And like there
right.
was the most leverage, and there was the most like, hey, are you enjoying how rich you're getting? Like, how about we stop that? And
Right.
if you want to keep
Right.
staying rich, I mean, and then there's the risk that people get replaced. But if they could have really held the line like they're doing now, like imagine in the middle of COVID, even like, I mean, in the middle of like when everybody was hurting, that would
Yeah,
have
when
been
everybody
that
cared.
would have been the knife in the stomach to a negotiation position, that you're like, that these streamers recognized this was their moment to explode. And all of a sudden everybody said, like, well, if you want to explode, bring us with you. But like,
Well, hmm,
but so anyway, I don't know enough about like the negotiation tactics. I'm just saying, like, there clearly is some moment that they're seizing. My
now.
my sort of sense is like, is this really going to work? Because as that article points out, they're doing it at a time when the pie chart that they're staring at and saying, how come we're not getting a piece of that? It's getting smaller as we
Right.
speak.
Right.
And the projections on this industry are pulling back. And
Right.
it doesn't mean that anything's falling off a cliff or that it's doomsday or the end of the industry. But I always think in terms of like, well, does that still imply growth ahead? And if anything, I see a lot of consolidation. I see like the people aren't speculating on these businesses. They're realizing their limits and pulling back on them. So is that a time when you're saying, give us all that extra money, or you're realizing that people are in the process of laying a lot of other people off that aren't in guilds in some cases? So
Right.
anyway, again, that's one piece of it, which seems to be the core piece of it, which is responding to this streaming business that a lot of people are upset with, or don't think was what very well designed, or didn't have a good long view, or wasn't a sustainable project, or wasn't fundamentally sound. All these different criticisms. On top of that, it just seems like just because it's like a buzzy headline, everybody's also pissed about AI, which is all, it's its own speculation. Nobody even knows what real impact it's going to have. Probably a fair bet it's going to have a big impact, but you're like negotiating into the ether. You're not even, you're bringing that into a very core contract dispute over like the way money was redistributed during the streaming era. But then on top of that, they're just saying, but we want to lock down our fears about what this tech that just came out 6 months ago for most people's consumption, how it's going to affect our businesses. So to me, that feels like I don't even know if it's not an overreach, because obviously I want anybody to feel like taken care of, or whatever they feel taken advantage of. It's just like, how do you get specific about that? How do you really pin down the real impact of this, new technology? And I guess the Sarah Silverman lawsuit is probably the beginning of watching people fight back. But I can't help but wonder, is that what it felt like when Metallica, pushed back against Napster? Like there's these moments where these sympathetic artists said, hey, we're going to use our lawyers that we've spent so much time, fight for us this time. But in retrospect, it felt like, what do you really, it's like you're trying to like keep sand from falling through a sieve. Like, it's sort of like, there's this new thing that's happening that you should explore your rights in. And I don't think she's wrong to stand up, but I can't imagine that that's really going to work long term, I guess is what I'm saying. So anyway, that was a mouthful.
No, I don't think you're wrong. And I guess, to pair onto that, I guess where I've, and I sent into their group chat, like all these data points that I was finding, right? And I'm trying to pull it up over here if I can, but like there's this particular chart that I've just been staring at over and over again, which is like how much money the studios made last year, right? And then how do I square that with, and I don't know, honestly, so I'm probably not the right representative, but I don't know how much, like, I don't know specifically how much the writers and the studios are asking for, and what that constitutes. But okay, I think I'm gonna pull it up here. I'm trying.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm at a loss if I'm here to nitpick the specifics of the contract disputes.
Well, no, yeah, me too.
Because I don't know exactly how much they're making this year, or whether or not those are. So look, they should fight over, as they do. Like, they should.
Oh, totally.
Get into it. I'm just sort of observing the big picture of it, which is like, it feels like, how could there possibly be the same dynamic in the next 5 years that we just experienced in the last 5? You just went off screen, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm just, and so part of me thinks like they're negotiating about a recent past that isn't the relevant future. But maybe that's the way this works. I don't know. I'm not. It feels like it's a, Bob Iger's literally walking around saying, I'm not sure TV is a core business for us anymore. Like the amount of people this time in 2020, 21 that were like gobbling up their own libraries and saying, okay, this is the reason why we're going to succeed, is because we never share anything. Now people are back into this, like, just license it to anybody and everybody, just give it to everybody and just make every nickel you can off it. And that's that ownership model, it can't be a core business for everybody.
Well, I mean, so I guess the point I'm making is that, or at least I can't pull it up now, but maybe next time. But basically that, Disney saw a loss last year of $400 million in revenue, whereas Netflix booked a $5.6 billion profit, right? And so like I was looking at all these numbers, right? And it's like the top. Let's see here. I'm looking at it now. Unfortunately, I can't show it, but it's like the top 6 studios are making maybe $100 billion in total, right? And then I look at like Google's revenue last year, it was $279 billion. So like, it's interesting that, the top 6 studios in Hollywood are making less than half of what Google made in the entirety of 2022. And so I don't understand how that squares. And then I look at video games as well. Video games is crushing it by comparison to Hollywood as well, doubled, maybe sometimes in some metrics 3 to 4 or 5x the size of Hollywood. And then I pair that with what is in this article that we were reading this morning with Hollywood on strike. And it's like, well, he's making a great point that basically the problem isn't AI necessarily. It's that the streaming model, to your point, you've always brought this up to me, is like that Netflix came into this space, ruined the business model. But I kind of feel like the business model is kind of broken in some ways.
The business model was challenged, but again, at some point, the sort of the boring dad view on this stuff is that nothing is black and white, and there's sort of like you can look at things 10 different ways, and like like, look, on the one hand, like let's zoom out. Is golden age of content. Everybody loves everything. Like the consumer experience has never been more amazing, to the extent that
Right.
the consumer is every single day hacking the situation to get an even better optimization out of it. Like at first
Right.
they're like, well, shoot, I guess now I have on demand everything, but do I really have to pay for it all the time? No, I'll just switch from subscription to subscription as my favorite show comes
Right.
on. And then
And
like, so
then and the
there's,
next one, right? When
so
was that, when Game of Thrones ended, it was like HBO's subscriptions dropped, right? I remember that.
so basically the consumer is now constantly 2 steps ahead of the business that it's, you know, enjoying. And so from the
Right.
point of view of the consumer, this is the greatest time ever. You know,
Right.
that if you're somehow bored watching more TV that has ever been made in the history of humanity, like
Hmm.
go and get addicted to your TikToks thread and realize the incredible artistry that's even playing out on there with some of the most interesting new voices that didn't have to wait in line to get a job in the WME mailroom to
Right.
work their way up through Hollywood. I'm just saying there's never been a more interesting spectrum for consumers. If you're an
Right.
independently
And we're
wealthy
spoiled.
artist,
We're
right?
spoiled.
If you're an independently wealthy artist, or if you're a very successful artist that genuinely doesn't have to worry about, you know, the sort of how you do what you do, if you're just like, I make stuff, it's never been more interesting. Like AI
Right.
is literally like blowing heads open of like how many
Right.
more creative things you could do, and the productivity on the most basic level, or
Right.
the
The
ideas, you have-
graphics.
the
Like
ideas
all
you
this
have-
time,
yeah.
like even I'm meeting with a director recently, and he's like, oh, it takes me like 6 months to a year to do the graphics for a short film. And I'm like, dude, that probably is gonna become
Right. So
very
now,
much more compressed, right?
right.
With
So
all this
now that
technology.
person gets to say no to more things. They get
Right,
to go
exactly.
through more ideas
Right.
along the way to saying,
Right.
no, I like the 11th version of this. But in the old days, you had to wait a year, like you say, to get to even number one. So I'm just saying,
Right.
from a
Right.
creator point of view of like who doesn't have to worry about money, and from a consumer point of view who has all this, and nothing has ever been more exciting, truly.
Right.
This is incredibly explosive renaissance of ideas and possibilities. The thing that you're watching people strike about in the streets is that the notion that people work in this, that people have jobs, they have ways to pay for their children's college tuitions,
Right.
that they're able to buy homes, that they're able to not worry about what they're doing next year or the next 15 to 20 years. That is what was cooked in to the more boring era for creators and
Right.
like whether
It's
it
funny
was,
when you say that, it sounds like just the 90s in general.
right, but
You know what I
take
mean?
it back to the
It's
50s
funny
when
because
when there was only 4 TV channels and there
Right.
was only a handful of studios that in a lot of ways were an amazing sort of the history of Hollywood. I mean, the way everybody wants to observe how many Jews work here is because there's also a setting for like immigrants that like would sort of self-start and create new industries. And there's all these really interesting tales of capitalism that we've sort of taken for granted along the way to getting here. You know, that this was
Yeah.
an era of entrepreneurship, of people creating new opportunities, the dream factory, that the idea they're literally dreaming up things that didn't
Right.
exist.
La La Land.
Experiences. All these things are true. It's just
Yeah.
as that eventually grew and people moved to Los Angeles and rerouted rivers to make this a place that could be, you know, housing lots of people. I'm saying all that interesting growth eventually brought an industry with it. And
Right.
and as things grow, they get more boring. You
Yeah.
know, like they're less exciting. It's the chaos and the excitement of AI and the excitement of
Well, I mean, if we look at, you know, the
So-
fervor
so-
around Clubhouse or Threads in the early period, right? And then eventually it dies out. I mean, as an analogy to this.
to a
in a
degree.
way.
I mean, that's a hype cycle too. I guess I'm just saying, like, what's really, when you say the cultural relevance of this story, like I am totally ignorant of what people deserve or don't deserve, or what's a contract dispute and how do you do a little bit better. And that's what, there's great people that mediate negotiations to get a little bit better for their clients or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, net, what's really happening is like this, almost like if you think about like economics, like hunter gathering versus agriculture, you know,
Yeah.
that there were communities of people that sort of ate what they killed, you know, and then eventually somebody figured out how to grow a bunch of wheat and rice and you could feed a lot of people. And then new types of possibilities of life surrounded civilization. That's what the studio system, that's what cable TV, that's what these institutional big bad guys that sort of like, you know, everybody loves to say, I don't like sort of centralized power. That's what they created. They created an agrarian society of people that worked in it, all the sound people that worked
That's
in
a
it,
cool analogy.
all the people that drove trucks, all these things that then feed that farm of content.
Yeah.
right? They all got to be a piece of it. But now when somebody says, well, that farm's full of a bunch of corrupt people that's not handing out enough back to the farmers, or that farm only makes fucking rice every day. What if we could make incredible like molecular gastronomy? Like once we start unpacking, well, that's true. Fine, rice is boring, or it would be interesting to have like uniquely prepared meals and all these things. But that starts to deconstruct the underpinnings of that society, and that's what's happening right now. Is that we're on the one hand bending towards better, more interesting, more creative, but we're unraveling what has been, which could be rebuilt. Maybe there will be a new agrarian society on the other side of this, but in the moment, this agrarian society is being deconstructed. And the assumptions that people picked a career and like, I'm going to do this for the next 20 years. You know, I work in daytime talk shows, and I'm the lighting guy that works in this stage over here that sort of makes Sally Jesse Raphael or Ricky Lake or all the people from the past have a show that I'm working at for the next 10 years. And there's syndication, there's residuals, there's all kinds of good things that come with this career choice that me and all the people involved in this show get. That's deconstructing. And now when we talk about Netflix or different businesses that have opted to speculate aggressively on content, which is pay people a lot of money up front, but reserve all the rights back. Now those people that are getting paid up front, all they have is the money they made up front. That's it.
Right.
So they're only as successful as their next gig as far as how they're looking at stability.
Which is tough because, you know, as maybe people don't know, is that which I've come to respect or understand better, is that people, you know, actors and writers and directors and producers, I guess the whole industry has learned to live a life where I work on a project, I get paid for that project, and then I'm on my next project, and that next project might be, you know, 2 months from now, or it could be 6 months from now, it could be even a year or 2 years from now. I mean, I know a person who, you know, was on a network TV show for 2-3 years, and then they're, you know, waiting for another 2 years for the next acting gig, which is an astronomical amount of time, even though they're still in SAG, etc. So but you know, as an outsider coming from tech, who has been like living on a salary most of my life, it's kind of bewildering to me. You know, like, wow, that is an intense lifestyle. I mean, I was a musician at one point, and that's kind of the musician's life, like going from gig to gig. But it's a different kind of battle.
But again, use the metaphor of hunter-gatherers versus agrarian. So when there's tons of buffaloes, or there's tons of fish in the sea, all of this is fine. The gig economy works.
Right.
And there's a reasonable expectation that some people get a lot of fish, but everybody gets some fish.
Right.
There's less fish. Like, and the value of the fish is changing, and how much nutrition you're getting off that fish is getting lesser. So I'm just saying, to borrow the analogy, that to me is the crisis point, is that like we're returning to being hunter-gatherers if this returns to being more of a gig economy, which, by the way, outside of this, frankly, good for them to have a world protected by guilds. But if you zoom out and look at the rest of content, like, I don't know, do all those people on Twitch have unions? Do all those people in the gaming space have tons of unions? Do all the people on YouTube that are creators? No, they're just hustling. And I don't know. Which
is interesting, because that might create an interesting dynamic. Well, so I think where that point is skipping over something that I think is really interesting about, you know, Stratechery's article, which is that, look, you had Netflix definitely and everybody else accelerating into streaming. As a result, we have the golden age of television. As we're spoiled as consumers, we have the, you know, it's so funny. Maxwell and I, our friend, were kind of making fun of anime and anime fans, because we were watching this anime and we're like, ooh, we don't like this anime. And so we go online and we're like, we wonder if everybody else doesn't like it, right? And we go to all these forums and anime forums in English, of course, and nobody talks shit about this anime, right? Everybody's like, you know, this is great. And if there's anything that's negative, the general forums are saying, hey, you don't like that anime? There's 20 other anime for you. You know, you don't like magic? But you like dragons, there's an anime for you. You like magic, but you don't like men. Okay, there's an anime for you. So, like, you know, like, anime is so diverse that you can just go to, you know, and in a way, I kind of looks like we're accelerating to that in television, where it's like, oh, there's every possible permutation. Of course, there's always going to be that upper crust of HBO, Apple TV kind of
But
content,
again, you're
but
talking about a
it's like,
consumer experience.
right, the
Like,
consumer experience. But I guess so that's leading up to the point that Stratechery is making, which is that, hey, look, not only do we have a ton of content coming out of TV and film, and the consumer is spoiled for choice, and this consumer is spoiled by user experience of not having advertising, right? And then you have this situation where we also are spoiled for video games, we're spoiled for TikTok, we have every type of possible permutation of content that has ever happened on the planet is now, right? Like every every day there's more types of content and more people doing content, and that's what Hollywood is competing against.
but
Right?
it's funny, even as you say that, like, I mean, the word content, it's such like I don't know if it's truly a tech world in introduction, like that word. And it's an apt word. I remember thinking a lot of companies that started using that word in the last 10 years were smart, because they were saying that they were doing more than just film and TV.
Yeah.
But like, there's something so like antiseptic about that word. And I guess that's where I sort of, on some personal level, working in this industry, like, I think so many people of my generation got involved in stuff because it was a dream factory, because it was movies, you
Right.
know, pictures that move and
Well,
make
film,
sense. Like there was these sort of like this sort of like value. There was this notion of scarcity, that it was a big fucking deal to get to make one. Like it was only, and it's not only some people
right,
because of power, only some people that maybe worked that hard, or were actually that talented, you know, that sort
right,
of
right.
paid their dues, as we were all told when we were coming up as PAs. There was just something about it that made it special
Well, I
and
feel like there's a
indispensable.
romance to Hollywood. There's a romance to
Sure,
film,
but
and
that
it's
was
why Hollywood is patting itself on the back,
but
you
it's
know, in a lot
built
of
around a
ways.
scarcity model. It's built around
Right,
it being special.
right,
Whereas like we're now in the phase that it's not that big fucking deal to be
right,
on a Netflix series if you're an actor.
right.
Most people are. If you're anybody that acts, if you're not on a Netflix show, you're probably not even in the business. I mean, that sounds like ruthless. I'm just saying, like, it's not hard to get into the volume of content that's out there
Well, in the last, you mean you're speaking to the
in the
last
last five,
decade?
10 years, in the last
Yeah,
10
yeah,
years. So I'm just saying we've reached a point that now we're even sort of, we're carrying sort of semantics and sort of meaning from a previous era into the current
right,
moment.
right,
And
right,
I guess that's something that I was even noticing on my trajectory, as I sort of was noticing the rise of YouTube, the rise of social video. And I'd been sort of in the cable TV world, or eventually pivoting
right.
to premium. Is I remember and I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this, but I just would tell myself that, well, I guess the difference between me and that stuff is disposable. Like that's disposable content. Like people don't necessarily go back and watch a YouTube video
Oh,
from,
I see. Like the
it's churning.
cultural relevance of it
It's like listening to
is
live
much
radio.
less.
Like
Yeah,
it's just, whereas like I was really into the idea that like, wow, people still watch The Sopranos. Like that's like people still watch that
like
now. Like these are
return
the,
to it.
so I kind of identified myself, rightfully or wrongfully or effectively or not, that I'm more interested in indispensable or indisposable content. So that was my way of sort of hanging on to that notion of it being special, is that there's this
Right,
corner of this stuff that feels like it's still like the why we all decided to do this with our lives, or why this captivates people, why, you know, a moment of TV can be so impactful, and why that's exciting to be a part of that yourself.
right.
So I guess I'm just saying is I'm also noticing this other trend in this. And then I think is that the words are starting to adapt. Like content is just like
You mean that
pumping
you are
stuff out.
recognizing it becoming more relevant to you, or
Or it's just another way to make sense of what are we all talking about? Like I still think there's a weight of like, it's like that Hollywood dream factory, but it's no longer the Hollywood dream factory. It's just the content factory. It's just a
well,
thing that
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I still think that there is. I remember last year or the year
as a
before.
business, as a
Well,
business,
I get that, but I guess
it's not to say there aren't special shows.
like last year, or the year before, we were in, one of our previous colleagues was pitching you know, a Web3 game. And one of the arguments that was being made why this should be a film is that, look, films are the, you know, they are the most cultural relevant piece of content or whatever it is that one could produce about a thing, which I think I would captured me. Like I felt like this was an argument to be made for Hollywood, that this was, hey, look, this you guys are in the news and a lot of people are using your game, etc. But you know, if we make this into a film, oh, this is going to be something that is to remembered. It's going to have it's going to have significant cultural relevance in like modern society, et cetera. We can make a story that can capture the hearts of people, blah blah. And I feel like, that's not true for me of like TikToks. So like I think to a certain extent, I think that Hollywood still has this allure and this power. Look at Barbie, look at Oppenheimer, these films, I think, at least I hope, like Barbie, I think is gonna, influence the way we look at toys, etc., and how we look at play and children and content in that world. And that's a very big conversation, I think. And then Oppenheimer might cause Americans to look at themselves, in a certain way. So I think there is something to that. But at the same time, as a consumer, as a person who has all the apps on my phone, I think content is a zero-sum game. It's like, yes, Oppenheimer, I'm
Well,
gonna go.
there's only so many hours that you're awake.
Exactly. I'm gonna go, 168 or whatever it is per week or whatever. It's like, I'm gonna go with you to see Oppenheimer. That is hours I'm taking away from sitting at my house and watching TikTok, but I am watching TikTok, and that is consuming me. It is, maybe it's not influencing my brain, my like neurochemistry the way that Oppenheimer might, but it is taking up my time, and that amounts to actual money in terms of what Hollywood is actually making, right?
But I love looking at these things again. I'm just borrowing these like farms metaphors, but like think of all these different pieces of content like buildings, like and again, how much does it take to make these buildings? And again, that's to me why it's taken so long for the internet, as I kind of think it's doing now, to fully disrupt film and TV. It was very fast, its impact on music is very fast, its impact on print. Arguably porn is another sort of institution that we've sort of, I almost think is like the test lab to even imagine how these things might affect other corners. But like film and TV, look, it costs a lot of money to make a movie. Right. It takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of concerted effort.
Of time.
But just think about like what we're about to experience with Oppenheimer, and like the amount of buzz, the marketing, but for just 3 hours of life.
Right.
Like it's, and so, but again, imagine that almost like in building terms. So like Oppenheimer is like the new Burj Khalifa. Like that's the new biggest building in the world. Khalifa. Burj Khalifa, excuse me. Thank you for correcting me. But it's the new like giant building that everybody should be excited about visiting when they go to this city, because it's this thing that represents,
which is also 3 hours of time.
Right.
Roughly.
So, but I'm saying like that's sort of what these things are. And at some point, somebody's in the building of building buildings. Right. So meanwhile, there's a TikTok video that's just like a little lean-to pup tent, at the burner party down the street. I'm just saying like that's sort of the level of an economic investment each of these things have.
Right.
And
I mean, to be fair, like, of course, Mr. Beast, for all that he's achieved, he's also an anomaly, but he's also putting in, I don't know how many hours to make that like Squid Game, whatever. So that's also a big thing.
So he started with a bunch of pup tents, but turned those pup tents into some really valuable bricks. And now he has a very modern.
Now he has a Burj Khalifa of YouTube.
Basically. He's someone that didn't ask for permission to build his skyscraper.
Right.
And that's an incredible story.
I mean, and I think that's what is fascinating. And I hope that, because I do feel like the Hollywood business model has been waiting to be disrupted. It is extremely old. And actors coming to Hollywood who are doing auditions and things like that, and writers who are coming here, working their way up writers' rooms, are they because they are forced to enter this gate-kept universe, ignoring, what is the Mr. Beast path? And to be fair, there are a lot of people who are not, right? There's a lot of actors who were like Anna Akana, who started out on YouTube or Instagram, and then now is doing her own produced content. She actually does her own films. She has been in a film, I think, right? So like, is this already diversifying in terms of what actors and writers can do to make money outside of the Hollywood system?
Starting to,
right? It's already starting, right?
It's a great time to be.
Right. It's people have been doing it to a certain extent, but it hasn't become the way. You know what I mean?
It's becoming a real way, in a way that like some people made a lot of money in crypto and a lot of people lost a lot of money in crypto.
Right.
But it's still a very speculative new thing that some people are eventually looking. And then those people on the other end of that arc will make different types of, multipliers, whereas the people that were very lucky or took smart bets, so.
Well, see, but at the same time, that's happening to me, right? The actors, the writers, the producers, directors, they have potential new paths to audience and money via the internet that is currently disrupting their universe.
Right,
At
but
the same time, you have this.
for that stuff.
Right, there's no guilt for that. No, totally. So that's
hunter-gatherer behavior, what's
right,
happening there.
Right. Good point. And then on the other side, you have the studios who have chased down this business model that they're literally losing billions on, right? Chasing Netflix, which will probably come out of this fine, given their profit margins and their subscriber base, and the fact that they can probably even produce content now.
By the way, those profit margins are a novel thing. For the longest time,
right.
They were just chasing market share.
Right. And so so this is happening over here. The actors, the writers, all the talent is over here. And then the studios are over here was fighting with a broken business model, fighting with consumers who are used to and spoiled by us the way that we receive content from all these different directions, from TikTok, Netflix, YouTube, HBO, all that. And they're not going to return to a traditional TV business model, right? And if they go down the path of more streaming, they might get hurt.
I think
so. I don't know what their solution is either. Right.
The thing that we haven't, and I'm doing my own learning on, that I think is the same way that AI is this like looming specter on the sort of people's worry about what else can tech do to this. Yeah. I think the biggest story that our chat group hasn't talked enough about, and I think is the story, is what's going on with fast channels. And that
what do you mean by that?
That is the big TV trend. That's what's happening.
Can you describe what is a
fast channel? Basically, it's a free ad-supported television that is a fast channel, and Roku, Tubi, Movie, Pluto, those are like the household name versions of this that are already have created their
Roku's
own free ad-supported television. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. But most importantly, it's on your television. It's connected. It's CTV, connected TV. That is the story of this year. That is, everybody's going nuts over strikes. Everybody's going nuts over AI. But what's actually shifting now? We'll see if it survives that sort of crucial test of when it really goes mainstream. But it's happening, and it started. And the main sort of beneficiaries at first have been people with big libraries. So like if I'm some like the internet prank video kind of library, I just start creating my own free ad-supported channel. And the beauty of it is that this actually adheres to the old cable TV boring content era model, that the advertiser has a very sharp understanding of who they're advertising to. There's no like complicated metrics of all these different types of viewers watch Discovery or A&E or Animal Planet. It's like, no, the people that love Ancient Aliens. This is the Ancient Aliens fast channel. And we just put Ancient Aliens on here all day long. And sometimes we put other shows on here. Or now what you're starting to see, Netflix is going to have their own fast channels. So in addition to the subscription service, all those shows that like people can't find on the recommendation filter, or just somehow buried in that morass that isn't showing up when you tell your friends, what should I watch on Netflix? That's all just sitting around. And Netflix can very easily just start creating these different distribution models that will be ad supported, that will make ad supported money. And again, the question is, does the ROI live up to the hype? And that's sort of, to me, the question of the moment. But it is a much more fundamentally sound business pitch. And that's where I'm keeping a big eye on it, is it the basic metrics of where does the money come from, who is it value to, and how does that subsidize people's consumer experience, which is what cable TV did, what subscription as a business model was intending to upend. That makes a lot more sense. And it's happening. Like, this isn't like, I'm not like looking into some future, like turn on your TV, there's thousands of channels already there.
And so how is this?
And what people that are like running towards this as a business will first tell you is, while you and me sit in LA, or friends of ours sit in New York, or other live in big metropolitan areas where we all sit around obsessing over actors striking, there's the rest of America, and there's the rest of the world that gives a lot less, sort of attention to these things. And are just like, I don't know, is CSI on? And they just turn it on. Oh, there's a whole channel devoted to CSI. I'm just going to watch that. And there's also undoing the user experience. Like, Netflix bet hard on the idea that people want to a la carte everything. And but what it's actually created is this sort of like what we can all watch an SNL skit joking about, is that we all just sit there and scroll and don't actually watch anything. Whereas now people are, there's articles about this. There's this novelty of like, oh, I just turn it on and it's already on. I don't have to make any choices. It's already playing. and I can just leave it on. And
it's
it's passive. It's as if this is novelty of television, what it always was. But I'm saying we're watching a backlash to the streamer business bet.
but is it like singular stuff? So as you're describing it, so it's like this is only cooking, only whatever.
It's whatever
thing.
you want it to be. It's whatever you and your advertiser decide to put on that channel. And it's
Wow.
very easy to spin up a fast channel. So
Right.
basically now you're watching like Peacock, NBC Universal, and Oxygen. They're like, fuck it, we got to get in on this because we got huge libraries. So they're creating like the true crime channel,
Right.
that it's like Oxygen.
Always true crime.
That it's also, so for someone who loves like true crime on Oxygen, why wait for that show at 9 p.m. tonight? Why DVR it?
Yeah.
Why click on anything when it's just on?
I mean, I think that is the rest of the world, to your point, because I was at a dinner party last night and I'm like, I think we are in a smaller class of people, like using class rather deliberately, but
Our community
of people who enjoy The Bear, who enjoy
totally
Succession. I think Succession, although it's capturing this, and I think I saw something, I heard something in another podcast where it was just like, as much as these big shows like Succession and Last of Us, etc., are getting these Emmys and they're getting the accolades in the media, etc., they're not getting the ratings.
Look,
nobody cares.
I go back to my boss at I worked at A&E, which in the 2010s was literally the bellwether of cable.
By the way, I'm sorry to our viewers. Fred drops names like this a lot. I'm just kidding.
It was the bellwether of cable TV, meaning that I would go to like industry conferences, and I was felt very thankful to have the experience of working there. And I would hear other executives at other channels, like in meetings with prospective sellers, but like, we need a show like this on A&E. Like we were that type of thing for a long time, is that we were that middle of America. We understood what worked. And our charts were not these awesome Netflix charts. They were just this slow and steady year-over-year growth. There's a much more boring business model, but it works amazingly. And my boss at the time, this guy, Rob Chernow, who still has a big wig job in the A&E networks, but I learned a lot from him. I remember like we would put on a show, and if that show got critical love, he'd be like, we're fucked. All right, that show's last the season.
Interesting.
Because he knew. This is like 2000. This is like 2011. This isn't even like some like amazing moment that we're in right now. He knew then that critics and audiences are rarely
not aligned. Right.
And that's why Rotten Tomatoes is so fascinating, because they have those two scores, right?
Right. Which is very smart. Very smart of them.
So, but I'm just saying that idea of something that is a critical darling is almost always a death knell for
which might happen to Oppenheimer and Barbie, right? Barbie might be the the blockbuster, and Oppenheimer is going to be like, oh, what a great film that
but again,
that did hit its mark, but it's not it's not going to outsell Barbie.
But look at how
Tom Cruise, right?
But look how HBO managed that as a portfolio. Like first of all, they were the OG subscription service, subsidized by a major cable TV, but subsidized by a cable TV bundle. Like there's no way they survived off that $13 a month. But the point is that they had the privilege of saying, we don't care what advertisers say. We're the avant-garde. We're the ones that care about making The Bear or whatever. And they basically sort of eventually found a groove that like, we'll do big popcorn TV shows like Game of Thrones, but then we'll do like really weird stuff with Nathan Fielder. We'll do Random Acts of Flyness with, over here. Like they did some really interesting portfolio plays, and that kept their brand up. When Netflix set off to say, oh, we're going to crush HBO, they were actually trying to crush cable TV. And it was almost exciting for people like you and me that it seemed like they were just making more HBO
stuff. I mean, they did make that entry, right? It was like BoJack Horseman, House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, and a few others. It was like, okay, this seems like it could be HBO, and maybe it was a pump fake. It was like, no. Actually, we're going to do everything that you don't care about in the countries that you don't even think about. And then, because I remember that day I think I was in Vietnam or Singapore or something. It was like, oh shit, Netflix is now in 100 countries out of nowhere, like just like flip a switch, and now they're
it's like Threads. It's like Threads launching again. Threads launched off of Instagram. Netflix launched off of DVDs. Right. So they had that amazing like sort of.
Well, they launched off of the internet, I would argue.
Well, no, but I'm saying they had
in terms of the 100 countries, but yes.
No, but I mean they had their DVD business to build a treasury and all this stuff. But I guess I'm just saying like that's what's interesting is that like, to go back to the consumer experience, it's never been better to be a consumer, and it's never been like a more passionate experience to be a consumer. Like you and I can swoon over The Bear and love it. but like, yeah, like, so we're being super served at somebody else's likely loss if
Right,
they were to
right,
only make the Bears.
right.
So that's what's interesting is of like when somebody can successfully do what John Landgraf has been doing at FX, is that he is the OG. Like he is like one of the last great kind of like, TV executive titans, because he sort of has this
Right.
broader picture. And if you look at the slate that FX kind of brings to Hulu, it's a very diverse kind of market
Right.
savvy slate. So that's what's exciting. But yeah, like it's easy to miss what used to be so bluntly true in cable, which is it ain't coming back next season if it's not rating.
Right.
And so in the ad supported model, like the Bear would never exist. Chef's Table would
Totally.
never exist.
Would die.
And so
Totally.
so again, as consumers, we can love this and say, fuck all these people. It's their industry to figure out.
Yeah.
Because it only keeps getting better for us in this kind of like sort of runaway train. But for
Right.
a lot of us that are reading those headlines and worrying about a lot of people that want their jobs back, like I think it's like boring is good for them.
Yeah.
Stable returning shows
Oh, totally.
that fill the market shelves
Totally.
and don't necessarily get critical. I mean, to me, Barbie's an interesting other machine. It's actually Barbie is most of the press I notice is about how it's the ultimate branded content play. That it's like
Oh,
it's
I mean, and
it's
and
like
I,
less of
I
a
was,
crowd pleasing. It may or may not be a crowd pleasing experience. I'm just saying it's the ultimate
it doesn't
example.
matter. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter. It's already a success. And I
yeah.
think, and I was talking to someone who works, close to the Barbie franchise and recently, and it was like, I mean, here's the thing, like Barbie almost was perfectly. If I wonder if some executive over there at Barbie was like, you know what, the strike's coming. Let's make or maybe they're even smarter than that. They were like, it doesn't matter if strikes are coming or not, but we're gonna make partnerships with every brand that is down to work with Barbie, from Pinkberry to whoever. And now it's like we don't need Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling to go out there and market for this movie, because we have partnerships with brands that are arguably bigger than these stars.
And I guess like
And maybe that's a model. Maybe that screws, like everybody's talking about how, oh, you need the actors to market for projects. Sure. I mean, I don't think that many people actually know who Cillian Murphy is, to be honest, even though I love the actor. But like, how big is he really? He's not Tom Cruise, right? But if Oppenheimer, I mean, there's no brand that's going to work with Oppenheimer, but like every other brand now, or every other film now that has some kind of mass marketability, can partner with all these, like the Lego model, basically, right? Lego can partner with every other franchise and they love it. They are like helping each other
but
grow.
what you're
Like
seeing is
that
amazing.
is
But
a
you're
better
seeing
model for marketing.
innovation. But you're
Right.
seeing
That's
innovation.
innovation.
And what used to be 4 TV channels, few hundred cable channels, that was just like the rinse and repeat, show up to the upfronts,
Right.
show up to the cable meetings and sell to the buyers or whatever.
Right.
It was this very simple model that everybody built long careers off of.
Right.
Now you're seeing the one major Lego block. Where's the money come from? The advertisers, the brands.
Right.
Okay, well,
Right.
they're getting innovative. They're realizing they don't
Well,
need
they have
it.
to, and they always have been. The advertisers have always been the most innovative.
But I'm
in a lot
saying
of
they're
ways.
realizing they don't necessarily need the distribution
Right.
marketing over here. They're like, maybe
Right.
we
Right.
can go straight to talent ourselves. Maybe we can just start, infiltrating experience.
Oh, you mean the reverse of, like, basically Mattel or Barbie or whatever making a film going direct through that channel.
But also like realizing that the real long business isn't the movie. The movie's the marketing for the rest of the business.
Right.
Like, so they're building.
Which is funny because that's what Transformers is and was, right?
So I'm saying,
like originally back in the 90s.
So you're seeing brands innovate, you're seeing creators innovate, saying, wait, why do we need to like knock on Netflix's door when I can spin up a YouTube channel tomorrow?
Right.
So and then you're even
and hire some agency that's based out of LA anyway, who needs the money,
or no agency, and just do it yourself.
Or do yourself.
And then you're even seeing like the legacy content people discover this fast channel business, which is like, wait, we don't need Netflix. We can literally take, and again, for the people that were smart enough to own stuff, who didn't take the upfront money, who didn't.
Well, I mean, that's kind of funny, because I think in this trajectory article, he does say that, hey, he does kind of allude to the fact, a gripe that he's had for a while, which is that why are the content players, why are the studios going into the tech play, which is not their level of comfortability and not where they have an advantage. So whereas what you're saying is,
because they're not nimble. They're not nimble.
Right, they're not nimble like that. And whereas why don't and also like the tech play is a whole other, it's like a different brain, right? But like, what you're saying is, why don't the brands, why doesn't Barbie, why doesn't, I don't know, Hello Kitty or whatever, why don't they go and create the content themselves? Right, which is interesting
I
because
think
that
they're
is
starting,
is very even more disruptive to the studios, right? If studios
I,
enter this like open space, which they thought was possible, which is the tech platform, which is the streaming platform, now you're seeing a potential brand go, hey, you know what, we'll just either partner with you guys, or we're just jump over you guys and produce our own stuff, which is can be even more
but the thing
jarring
is,
to the studios, I would
but
imagine.
the thing is,
right?
these are all experiments. Not everything is going to be
Sure,
Barbie.
sure.
This could be that one
Well, Barbie
crypto
is an
coin.
anomaly. It's one of the biggest brands in
Right,
the
but I'm
world,
saying
right?
this is
Right.
Bitcoin next to a bunch of altcoins. I'm saying there's the thing
Right,
that is obvious, and then there's things that are all speculative.
right.
The point is all of these things are fair game. Everything is being experimented with.
Yeah.
And again, what we're watching is the dissolution of that one stable farm factory that everybody had to work with. If anybody wanted to find stability or money in this business, the advertisers had to work with them, the creators had to work with them, that everybody involved had to work with the system. Now, the reason these big businesses aren't going to abandon cable, they're not going to abandon, is because they're still actually making tons of money. Like the actual, you're looking at the chart,
billions.
the chart's doing this, but you're still looking at all of this money. Like, so nobody's like, let's stop making all this money. That's what was so crazy about Jason Kilar during pandemic when he was running HBO Max, when he took, admittedly, these movies weren't going to make it into theaters because nobody was going to movies, but he took Godzilla, Wonder Woman. He took these things that literally were supposed to be, like, at the very least, even on a loss leader day, still making hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And he said, fuck it, let's just make it a subscription bait. And that's what was so crazy about that moment, is that he did jump off the cliff and say, fuck it, because pandemic made him think that was the right thing to do.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that these big businesses aren't going to stop making cable TV. They're not going to stop making movies, because there's still a chunk of money. But the point is, it's not going up. So where does that development budget, where does that R&D budget, where does that kind of, let's explore what else can be done here, where does that start to navigate? It isn't going to be like, let's develop more innovative movies. It isn't going to be, let's develop more innovative TV. It's going to be like, what else can we be doing? And yeah, they're going to micro influencers. They're going into like direct to consumer models. They're going into like experience economy business that don't live in the 2-hour running time of a movie, but live when Bob Iger says TV isn't our core asset. It's because he's got amusement parks, he's got merchandise, he's got metaverse, he's got Vision Pro coming with Apple. He's got so much other stuff to say, this isn't our core business.
I mean, it makes sense, because why in some ways, why should anything be your core business, given that everything is so opportunistic? And
when it was a cash cow, that's why it should be your core business. And that's the thing that is easy to look back on that.
Yeah, but it was right.
Right. Yeah. But that's the heartbreak for the people that are stressing out about jobs right now. Is that TV made hand over fist money. And it wasn't like keep the rich rich. It was spread out. It went into infrastructure building. It constantly grew at a stable pace. That's what went on for decades. And it was accountable, because Nielsen ratings were there to tell you that no matter how creative you thought you were, the audience doesn't care on a bad day. It was this really stable thing.
And now, of course, the studios are not trying, they don't want to share their streaming numbers, because that is market research for the other competitors, which is very ironic, right?
Or stuff they don't want to say this was a dud, because we spent a lot of money on that dud. They'd rather not tell you that. Right. So that's where, like, we're running towards innovation. We're running towards a better consumer experience. We're running towards a creative era that rivals the Renaissance of the 15th century. All of those things are true, but sort of like,
well, I don't know. The Renaissance is a big jump, but
no, but I'm saying you're running towards a moment that a lot of creativity is bubbling that we haven't even possibly imagined. And some people like to think about those moments like the Renaissance.
Well, I just have trauma from the word Renaissance because of Web3. We were talking about.
Well, I think Web3 might have just been the precursor to everything else that's happening right now.
We can save that one for another time.
But the point is that, like, think about those people 15 years ago that worked at the Fujifilm factory.
Yeah.
Or think about the people that worked at the Fuji digital camera factory.
Right.
That didn't work in glitzy towns like New York and LA, where every time we strike, everybody in media puts us on the front page news.
Right.
They just worked in businesses that were rendered obsolete because technology came along.
Right.
And a lot of people lost their jobs, and a lot of them can blame Steve Jobs for that, frankly, because it's like our iPhones that have killed all those camera businesses. But I'm
Right.
just saying, like, that's what's happening, and it's uglier. And I think of it as like conservation films. Like, if you want to make a highly rated conservation film, what kind of animals do you put in it?
Right.
Polar bears, cute animals, but like ugly insects and scary reptiles in those films, those rate less. So right now, this is the cute, fuzzy, beautiful thing that's a tragedy that it's on the wrong end of like a moment of friction in an industry. But
Right.
there's a lot of other people that nobody puts them at the front page news when their industry is struck the way this is getting hit.
Yeah, and I do wonder, yeah, like what it all still makes me wonder, what does that all mean, right? Um, like what kind of a world are we looking towards? Like, is it going to be more of the, fast channel type content, which might be inevitable? What does that mean for, I guess more of the question is, what does that mean for the Bear type content, Succession type content, HBO type content, what Apple TV is trying to do, right? Does that mean those still have their place, right? Because if
I
there's no
mean,
money in them, right? Like, the great thing about Apple is that Apple doesn't care, but eventually they might have an Amazon Prime moment too, where they're going to be like, yo, you guys just spent, $5 billion in the last, or $6 billion in the last 3 years, and we're not getting much back from that, even though we do sit on like $100 billion or whatever Apple sits on, right? And Amazon Prime obviously is in an existential crisis now because they spent, astronomical amount of money on Citadel and all these things, and they're not getting necessarily the return that maybe they want. Netflix is the only one that is, but clearly Netflix's strategy of, spray and play shotgun across many demographics, across many different categories that they are identifying very well via data, right? I mean, Netflix, to be fair to Netflix, is, from what I understand, is that they don't use data to make creative decisions in the way that we might think, hey, I'm going to look at this data and make this kind of genre. But what they are doing is they're using the data to identify that, hey, this is a big group of people, right? Fantasy. So let's put the creatives that do fantasy and make them make fantasy stuff. And there's people that want more Indian content, right? And this is what the Indian folks are liking to watch. And so let's make more content in that arena. And so clearly that is working for Netflix to a certain extent, right? Despite everything. And in a lot of ways, this like Emmy run might not necessarily be working for these people from the business model perspective, even though, to your point, there is still money there, right? Even though I
I
do
guess, like,
subscribe to HBO because, or Max, because Succession is there, and I will keep coming back. But how many of me are there? How, like, maybe a
but
million,
again,
2 million, 3 million? Is that enough for them to be like, yes, I can justify that this streaming subscription is able to pay for the overall cost of like episodes that sometimes cost $1 million to $2 million, right?
look,
To make.
I guess I get, look, at some point, these things are part of a bigger cultural ecosystem.
Right,
Like,
right.
the, like, if you were to hold up the art in like a museum in Paris to the
Yeah,
same metric of like, what's the ROI on like an ad supported television show, or an energy drink that's sold on a shelf, just as a product, a consumer product.
yeah,
It's possible that the government might be subsidizing those museums. Like, the real estate alone to like keep the Musée d'Orsay or the Louvre is probably insane.
right,
But somewhere along the
right.
line, like the government of Paris probably thinks it's really important to its
Right.
long-term heritage to support the arts.
Well,
you know and and
I
and
buy that.
and
I
you
buy
know
that.
and so there's a public good component to what is the value of this, like when we sort of like break these things down into Wall Street Journal terms,
So
right?
are you saying the government should bail out Hollywood?
No, what
Yeah,
I'm saying is, when you tell me that there's a show like The Bear that might be economically unsound,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know but it might actually have a bigger value in some way of evaluating it. Like, that reminds me of like, well, look, this is part of what a progressive society does. At some point, it values things differently. And we're talking about art here. We're talking about creativity, and if
Yeah.
everything needs to live up to sort of like the YouTube metrics of how much advertising did that generate, then that actually starts to make most culture shitty.
Right.
Like I think like, and frankly, this is what, if we ever want to waste our time talking about Web3, and is that that arguably created a conversation for how there could be sustainable businesses for smaller products and smaller communities around things, that it did not everything has to be like, the next Squid Games.
Right.
So I guess that's my sort of hope and dream in all this, is because I do think our hearts as a society tell us that there's something special about a show that, that inspires maybe a smaller group of people, but in a major way. But if the only thing that deserves to be on television is something that like lives off of like some ruthless facts and figures of a bottom line, then this starts to challenge what we all came to this for. That's why I go back to like content versus dreams. Like there's something special about this that gets us to talk to our friends and get excited and get inspired and maybe change things in our lives after we watch a great movie or TV show.
Yeah, but I guess that calls into question like who gets to decide that the bear is, the Mona Lisa of television.
Well, look, at some point, a group of people that perhaps earn that privilege as like the commissioning.
Well, I mean, that's the Emmys, that's the Academy, right?
Well, that's the award system. I'm talking about who put it in existence, who took the risk on it, who said this is worth it. Well, it's a group of people that have kind of earned trust over time. Like they weren't Quibi. They weren't maybe the people that are currently cutting their teeth at Roku as new executives that have zero track record to say we have an audience. It's FX or it's HBO that they've created a patina to say what we make comes from a point of view, or it comes from an experience.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm challenging is that if the government comes in and gets to sit alongside these people and say, hey, yes, Succession is the one.
By the way, I didn't mean to suggest government should be involved. I brought that up that there's an ecosystem called the city or a culture.
I mean, I don't disagree with that.
I'm saying at some point, media needs to do this for itself. There needs to be, which is where PBS and the National Endowment of the Arts kind of sat on this as government funded.
I guess I don't know what you're saying. Like, are you saying that, like, if we look at the Louvre, or even, if we look at the Louvre and we're like, okay, the French government is propping that up as, because that's value to their tourism industry. It's valuable to their to what is relevant culturally to them from the historical, sociological, whatever perspective. And so they decide, hey, you know what, we're going to put an extra $1 billion into this per year.
Right, but they're doing it by proxy for the people, that the people taxpayer is
right. So I guess
is in a non-governmental situation when we ask ourselves these questions of like what's happening to shows like The Bear alongside shows like NCIS. Well, if everything only needs to make money, then we will only ever see NCIS.
Yeah,
because those are the actual big shows that make tons of money. I mean, I'm using that as a generic reference. I'm sure there's better ones. I'm saying if we care about a better world where all of these shows live, and again, we're talking about expensive things called TV shows that require big crews. They require lots of actors that usually get paid reasonable amounts of money. These aren't like me and my YouTube channel, which is me and my homies kind of making stuff that can be done for a very low cost. Talking about these big expensive buildings in this town, these skyscrapers and big buildings that cost money to make. Okay, well, the French government did it by proxy. Can this non-government conversation, is there such a thing as our own idea of a public good? And that's kind of what cable did. Cable was that subsidy, is they would create a broader swath of offerings because the cable business survived off of you wanting some HBO with your ESPN and your CNN. That's what cable once did. But
this is a bit orthogonal, but it makes me think that, that the actors and the unions and all this stuff, that system of unions needs an upgrade.
Or like it's all undergoing a time when we don't know where gravity's landing or what the earth looks like because there's so much changing in real time.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, it's like, okay, who decides what's relevant? Who decides what's culturally significant?
Either someone who's earned that privilege or trust, or pure democracy.
Well, Rotten Tomatoes, right? Which is interesting as well. Like, I mean, it's interesting because I look at ratemyprofessors.com.
Yeah.
And by the way, we should probably wrap up soon, but ratemyprofessors.com, like it's an interesting thing that kind of in a lot of ways ruined because like some of the professors, the best professors that I had are rated very poorly on ratemyprofessors.com because
Your
maybe,
democracy is messy.
yeah, democracy, like they didn't give you a good enough grade. They were too strict. It's like sometimes you need a strict guy to kick your ass. You don't like getting your ass kicked, and then you rate him, like give him a 1 star, like he's an Uber driver. So like there is
But
kind
this
of an
cuts to what I'm
interesting,
saying. When we
right,
sort of default to like why does anybody have power,
right,
decentralize everything? Like, okay, sure. And that sounds right.
yeah,
And on some level, these are the casualties, is that when we look backwards, we realize that
yeah,
there are things that had cultural
right,
value in some
that we
broader
care
sense
about,
that
right.
were a product of people that didn't try to please everybody all the
Which
time.
which is
Like,
tough because of the nature of these things, right? It's like TV and film are now, right? And
well,
then
TV and film
tomorrow
are also
they're different,
popular
right?
industries, whereas modern art got to
Right,
sort of be rebellious and do its own thing. Punk rock
right,
music gets to be rebellious. But now that everything is decentralizing and YouTube's happening, TikTok, we're watching punk rock
yeah,
happen again.
right,
We're watching Mr.
right.
Beast come out of nowhere and be
I
the only
mean,
thing anybody talks
we
about.
also, you mean at the same time that what you're saying is true, we also need like an Academy Awards for YouTube, you know?
Well, they have the streamies,
Yeah, I mean,
the
I think
webbies.
it could
They
be a lot
exist. It's just
bigger.
nobody's paying attention.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
again, then it'll slowly grow.
Right, right.
Again, that's what I'm saying. The actual creativity business is fine. And I mean business
Yeah,
in the like, well, is it happening? Is it thriving? Is there a lot of
right.
things
Is it
that could
making
get,
money? It might not
is
be
it creating,
profitable in the way that,
is
what
it
we
creating a,
understand from tech or other industries, but it is doing its job
is
to
it
a certain
creating a
extent.
stable economy that a lot of people like to have like hourly
Right,
lives that
right.
like ends at 5 p.m. and they go back to their kids? Like,
But
that's
but
where we're in
but
flux.
but at the same time, it's not, right. It's at the same time, 80 to 90% of the actors, cannot even get or cannot afford to get the SAG after health insurance or whatever. I forget the stat, but at the same time, like as I dig deeper into this, as I learn more about it as a very ignorant person, I'm like, wow, this is extremely dysfunctional. Like, whoa. I mean, it works and it does churn out great content that I will remember for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, like a lot of people are getting
But
fucked in the
what
process.
isn't dysfunctional? Like, how
I don't
functional is
know.
the tech world? How functional is the government? How
It's
functional
fair.
is
It's
anything?
fair. No, it's totally
I
fair.
think the only thing that's functional is like restaurants. Is that if they can't keep,
The restaurants are not functional at all.
no,
They're
but I'm
terrible
saying,
restaurants.
I'm saying it's sober. Like if it doesn't work, they shut down.
Well, I
And
mean,
like,
maybe the medical industry is functional, or I don't know, gaming. I don't know. I mean, it's a fair point, and maybe this jumps into a whole conversation about UBI and things like that. But
sure.
but yeah, but it still remains that I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people who are struggling, and it didn't quite hit me until the strike, and I hope that is impressed upon the rest of America, even though I don't know that it will, given that the studios own a lot of the media companies, and also like it might just not be relevant. People just might not care. It's all kind of interesting. I mean, I think functionally capitalism is dysfunctional, and
Hang
so
on. So
as a
this is
result,
it. So there's a guy, we don't have to record this, but just as a cap to our conversation, there's a guy that I follow a lot on LinkedIn. I might just read this to you because I think this really responds to what we just said. It's a little long. If you don't want me to, I could just forward it to you. But it starts with, for the past 2 years, this guy, Evan Shapiro, he's a sort of very successful executive who's now become a media universe cartographer. He's really, you should follow him if you're interested in this stuff. He made his name because he started creating these visual flow charts for all of media and like showed you like how do all the different entities show up like in like a galaxy map. So for
okay,
the past 2 years, I've been writing about the media apocalypse. Now with two different strikes, Iger selling off the Disney mills, Netflix adding ads, and layoffs everywhere, we can safely say that we are now mired in the eye of a deeply imperfect media maelstrom. Today, though, instead of pointing out even more of what's wrong with our entertainment industrial complex, I'm here to point to answers for what ails us, or at least one specific case study for how media must act if it hopes to transform and save itself from the self-destructive swan dive it's taken these last 3 years. The case study, the New York Times. The New York Times is one of the great icons of the news industry, and for much of its history, it was one of the oldest and of the old-fashioned media companies. Yet in the last decade, long before all its newspaper competitors and well ahead of nearly all other bigger traditional media players, the paper of record has metamorphosed from a paper and ink dinosaur into one of the great multi-platform content bundles on the planet. The Times owes its very survival and now thriving growth to the kind of visionary leadership and strategic decision-making that is noticeably absent from the other sexier corners of the content ecosystem. Basically, they're kind of saying, like, here's an example of a big, slow-moving cruise ship, which is part of the issues we're talking about. And what has turned them into a success is that they literally had to reinvent the whole model.
Right.
And they had to actually do it with everything at stake, which is that they had a legacy business that was at stake at every step. And I think that's what we're looking at. That's why, like, what are we negotiating under? We don't know what this looks like yet because it needs to be rebuilt.
I have to say, I might dispute this a little bit, or not dispute it, but I don't think he's wrong. But I think that I would addendum to that, or addend to that. What's the word? That New York Times is a massive brand, just like Drake is a massive brand. And the reason why I say Drake is because Drake made this whole stink about that, the AI music, right? And it turns out actually that Drake benefits from AI, just as Tom Hanks is going to benefit from AI, Tom Cruise is, all these names that are recognizable, are going to benefit from AI. They're also going to benefit from streaming. They're going to benefit from YouTube, Instagram, social media, all the big Mr. Beast, like all these big brands and existing brands are going to benefit from the new stuff because their brand will survive through any noise that happens, because their brand can be recognizable through all the noise, right? So if you have a smart enough leadership, they're going to be able to adapt to that and be like, okay,
read the piece I just forwarded you. They actually, the whole point he's making is they revamped all the leadership. And
I get that, but I'm just saying, like, just get a smart enough leadership and you get to take advantage of what is available to you in a world that is extremely noisy. And so I guess that's the point that I think is kind of interesting here, which is that, yes, we have a lot more noise and there's a lot more opportunities. It's very dangerous, and it's maybe harder for like people like you and I to start up, and which is true in the reverse, that recognizable brands benefit from a world that is very noisy. You know what I mean? So anyway, I do have to go.
Too. Yeah, so do I have to go drop off a cart to
yeah. Well, that was great. I think we have to adjust a few things, but that was a great first experiment. I realized that anyway, we can cover it later.
Well, it sounds like we can really only get through one topic in an hour.
Because that's true. Well, we could try to compress the format and stuff. But anyway, we'll talk about the format later. Anyway, thanks for anybody who's listening in the future or who isn't. And that's been that. That's been WCBH or Ungated or something like that, or FNM or whatever. All right, y'all. Bye.
Bye.